Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports, where today the regular season in the NHL has just ended, which means it's time to preview the first round of the NHL playoffs, as well as wrap up what happened at the end of the regular season. Guys, thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports, where I got to mention here, all of our videos are now going to be coming here at NHL on I-80 Sports on this new channel. So you got to make sure, because I definitely know you're not subscribed down below right now. Make sure that you subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports, where all of our content is going to be going here from now on. But if you want to check out our previous content, that will be on I-80 Sports itself. But drop a subscribe here. All of our content is going to be going here from now on. It's going to be more NHL-centric content here going forward. Please make sure that you support our friends over at the Designated Pundits and I-80 Sports as well. But make sure you subscribe down below for the rest of the predictions and recaps of the NHL playoffs and offseason upcoming and even beyond. So please make sure to subscribe down below and make sure you follow us down below on X or Twitter or whatever you call it these days at I-80_sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well. And the regular season is over. Playoffs have begun. And I can't remember a tighter finish to a regular season than the one we had seen this past week. Somebody the other day mentioned that Flyers-Rangers game years ago that should have determined the playoff seeding. Yeah, but that was just two teams. End of the season this year, there were 3 or 4 teams vying for position, and it went right down to the wire, too, in terms of seeding out west on Thursday night with teams like Vegas and Los Angeles as well. So we are doing a playoff preview today. We'll preface it this way. Some of the games had started. It is Sunday, April 21st as we speak. It's around 1 p.m. We wanted to do it earlier. I got a little caught up with some stuff Friday. Yesterday, as we're going to go off on a non-NHL hockey thing, was at the 50th annual FDNY versus NYPD hockey game out at the UBS Arena. 6-5 win for the FDNY. Game was close, but FDNY was blowing them out in the beginning. The PD made a spirited comeback, but FDNY won like usually happens. The FDNY's team is always very good, and they almost always win this game. First time out at UBS Arena, home of the New York Islanders. It's nice, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot smaller than I imagined it to be. It actually is a lot smaller inside than I thought it would be. Still a very nice arena, nice facility, easy to get to by public transportation. I actually didn't do that yesterday. I drove out with some people, but also, you leave there late at night, very easy to get back to our part of New Jersey from as well. So just easy to access and easy to get to, and nice arena on the inside and very nice on the outside as well.
Yeah, and for me, I've certainly had my share of busyness over the last few weeks as well. I mean, for me, I took a trip earlier in April to Canada for my first time, and I got to see a large chunk of Montreal. Got to go to a Montreal Canadiens game at the Centre Bell, which was so cool. That is definitely one of my more favorite arenas now, actually going and seeing that for real. It was a Tuesday night game against the Florida Panthers, and it was a great game. Even for a Tuesday night game, I was amazed at how packed the arena was, which was really cool. Speaking of packed arenas, yesterday I went to the Prudential Center on a Saturday and caught up with the PWHL games that were going on there, and caught PWHL New York versus PWHL Boston. It was a great experience. It was a great game. Really awesome to see, 8,000 to 9,000 people fill the arena at Prudential Center. And actually yesterday we saw take place on Centre Bell. I mentioned it before because they broke the attendance record for PWHL at over 21,700 patrons that came yesterday to that game, which is awesome. Grow the women's sport, support the PWHL as well. Please make sure you go and see those games because I'm watching some amazing hockey with it, and I know you'll find it amazing too if you give it a chance as well. But That's where we've been. It's been super busy, but enough talking about FDNY versus the NYPD and talking about the PWHL. We got to get back to the task at hand. We got to talk about the NHL playoffs, but we got to talk a little bit about how the regular season ended. We saw quite the Eastern Conference scramble at the end of the regular season. And I got to be honest, I was relatively surprised with the New York Islanders taking one of the wild card spots at the very end, that the Philadelphia Flyers had a stranglehold for the majority of the season. Tom, were you surprised to see Philadelphia fall out of a playoff spot so late?
A little bit, yeah. And just to preface it, and I don't mean to correct you, the Islanders spot is actually the third spot in the Metro Division.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
And in my opinion, this playoff format should be amended in terms of that third spot. That's something that we can talk about another day. I don't, because if we talk about it now, we'll be on it for hours. But I don't know if I was necessarily surprised. They caught fire under Patrick Waugh. And Tortorella was doing Tortorella things down in Philly. You know, it didn't help that they lost Carter Hart. We all know what happened there. We don't need to talk about that anymore. It didn't help that he's scratching his captain down the line, and then all of a sudden they get themselves into trouble down the line. They can't seem to win a game. You have Detroit surging. You have Washington surging a little bit as well. Islanders were surging at that point, though. The Islanders were well ahead of everybody, and then you can't ever count the Pittsburgh Penguins out, even though they didn't make it. You still have Sidney Crosby playing at an elite level at 37 years old. You can never count them out either. So it didn't surprise me per se. I just think that the way Tortorella was with these Flyers, I just think he burned them out. And I don't even know if he'll come back next year. They said they gave him a vote of confidence to come back, but Tortorella's even been saying that, this might be his last coaching job. He says he wants to get more into the front office side of things and out of coaching. And I think it's, one, because it's a little more stressful on him the older he gets, and two, there's a disconnect with these players now. A lot of these players don't want to listen to him anymore. So his little gaffe there in the last game, we can talk about a little later on. And it was something that I didn't know until the following day, believe it or not.
Yeah. I'm not surprised with Philadelphia's decline towards the end of the season. I mean, this was a team that was performing well above expectation and way above their weight class for the entire season. And John Tortorella is a lot to, be given credit for how well Philadelphia did this season, but he's also what led to the downfall this season as well. Let's not discredit that whatsoever, because John Tortorella doing John Tortorella things, benching your captain unwarranted a few months back, which made no sense. That was the beginning of the end in my mind for Philadelphia. Once they waved that white flag, I knew at that point that Philadelphia was more than likely going to find themselves on the outside looking in on the playoff picture. Detroit, to me, was a team that I was really rooting for towards the end of the season to take a wild card spot. And then Washington swooping in out of nowhere, taking that last wild card spot from them towards the end of the season. Washington really, really had quite the resurgence in March. They were one of the best teams to watch in all of March. John Carlson and Alex Ovechkin had amazing ends to their season. Alex Ovechkin now scoring 31 goals this season. We haven't seen an NHL player in the past score over an 18-year period 30 goals per season, which is pretty amazing. John Carlson, after missing the majority of last year, also coming back and being fantastic for Washington. Both of those players are big reasons why Washington has found themselves in a wild card spot, but Charlie Lindgren is the major reason why Washington is in the spot that they have. His goaltending has been unmatched in the Metropolitan Division as of late. He has been a major reason why Washington is in the position that they are in the first round against the New York Rangers, which we'll be getting to that one in just a little bit, Tom. I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about the Rangers here, but we do have to talk about one more team before we dive into the NHL playoffs. And ironically, it's a team that wasn't even close to making the playoffs this year, but this was the last year, potentially, that we're going to be seeing hockey in the desert. And we got to talk a little bit about the downfall of the Arizona Coyotes real quick. It was announced earlier this past week that the NHL has approved relocation of the Arizona Coyotes to Salt Lake City, Utah. So it's left to be seen if they're going to be known as the Salt Lake City blank or the Utah blank. But that's a discussion for a different day. Tom, I just want your immediate reaction on the fallout here. I know you've had your opinions over the past number of years on Arizona's place in the NHL and Gary Bettman essentially coddling them for the past number of years. Do you think this is the right time to move Arizona up and out? Do you think this has been coming for a long time?
You know what I do? I want to preface it with this about John Tortorella, though. The fact that I didn't know that I was going to bring up was I was watching the end of those games, and I guess I had one game on the TV and the other on the laptop. I think I had Flyers in Washington on the TV and Detroit and Montreal on the laptop. Apparently, when Tortorella pulled his goalie, he didn't need to. Detroit had already tied it. If he would have rode into the overtime, the Flyers still would have had a chance. My thing was, I guess something was up with the feed because to me, seemed like both of those games weren't as close to each other time-wise as they were, but apparently they were, so my feed must have been screwed up. But irregardless, John Tortorella, people want him to have the Jack Adams. He shouldn't have it this year. Not after that. He improved Philly, but he didn't get him to the playoffs. And as far as I know, it's a sad thing for Detroit too. And a little tidbit about Detroit is I don't think they'll be bringing Patrick Kane back next year. That's the rumor around there now. Kane was brought in to lead that team to the playoffs, to lead them to the next step, and they didn't do it. And I think at Patrick Kane, where he is now, he was just under a PPG this year, point per game, with the hip repaired. And I think he's going to go try to win himself another cup next year on a contender. I don't think he's going to take his chance again with a team like Detroit or his hometown Buffalo Sabres. So that's just some more food for thought. But back to Arizona, time had come. And maybe the time was coming for years. But the time had come. It had even been to a point where people down in Arizona were saying they don't care about the team. The sports reporters don't care about the team. The media down there doesn't care about the team. So I don't understand why you keep trying to keep this team going when nobody cares about it. They're not really that good. They never make the playoffs. They've won one division over the years. They went to the Western Conference Finals once. Really, the only time that team was competitive was early on when they had Keith Tkachuk, Jeremy Roenick, Mike Gartner and company. After that, it's been terrible. They've been trying to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. They had the years with Shane Doan. Some were good, some weren't. But it's been an abject failure. It's been a failure down there in Arizona. Should they have ever left Winnipeg? I don't know. We can't really debate that anymore. Winnipeg has a team back now. So it is time, and I'm happy that they're going somewhere where people will support it. Salt Lake, it's a good town. It's a growing town. They do like hockey. My qualm was, and we had talked about this back in the wintertime, my qualm was the arena. Now, they are going to play in the Delta Center. Yes. They're not going to build a new arena. Yes. But the new owner had said he's going to renovate the Delta Center to make it fit for hockey. How they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, how long it's going to take, I have no idea. But that was my biggest qualm with Salt Lake, because I'll tell you what, if it were up to me, and I still think this is the case, the team should have moved to Portland, Oregon. And they almost did move to Portland, Oregon almost 25 years ago. That's not happening. Utah's in there for the long run. They registered a couple names of the Utah Blizzard, Utah Hockey Club, regardless, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't know. We can talk about that another day. But it's good to have a team, I guess, in the so-called hockey market where they had the Olympics. And I'll tell you who it benefits too in a weird way. This actually benefits the Colorado Avalanche, believe it or not. The Avalanche are way out there. There's no teams near them. Now, I'm not saying Utah and Colorado are going to be next to each other like the Rangers and Devils are, but it's gonna decrease. I don't know if it's going to drastically decrease, but it's going to decrease the amount Colorado has to travel and the budget they'll have to pay to travel, because now Salt Lake City is a little bit closer to them than Phoenix is. So it gives them a rival, and it helps the Colorado Avalanche players out a little bit less travel per year. Not a lot, but definitely something to think about. So ownership in Utah has said they're dialed in. They said they're going to spend money. They're going to bring good players in. They know what they have draft-wise. They know the draft capital they have, and they're going to try to build a winner in Salt Lake City. So I'm curious to see where this goes. It doesn't change anything. There's no realignments. Everything's going to stay the way it is. So good luck to Salt Lake City. Congratulations, people of Utah. Hope you enjoy your new team, and hope they do well for you.
Yeah, I mean, all the stories that we were hearing towards the end on the utter mismanagement in Arizona, and it's all out there between people who were put in positions that had no prior experience in those areas being put in certain jobs and roles, between missed payments for hotels and all those different stories. I'm glad we can finally just put an end to the ridiculousness in the NHL in Arizona. This might not be the end of hockey in the desert, though. There does seem to be a desire, once the NHL explores further expansion, which apparently we're not done expanding in the NHL, which is a little ridiculous. There is talks that Arizona could be one of the first teams to get their team back, which does not make sense to me, but that's just my opinion. I know others have their opinion. Share it down below. But I'm happy to finally close this chapter and open up a new chapter in Utah. It does seem like the organization wants to do more with this team, wants to do right by the city with being given this opportunity to begin with. I'm excited to see where this team actually goes, especially given the pieces that they currently have. You have some really, really interesting players on this team right now that could be the future of a Stanley Cup contender in Utah. So that'll be really exciting to see. And I'm looking forward to all that comes with that. But it's time finally to get into our playoff preview, which, to recap, we have had a few playoff games already played. It is Sunday around 2:00 right now. So we've already seen one game for Toronto versus Boston. Boston won 5-1 pretty handedly yesterday in game one. So Boston's now up 1-0. It's not going to change my opinion on my outlook of the overall series, and as well as all the games that went on today and yesterday. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Carolina also facing New York Islanders in game one in their series. Carolina won 3-1 yesterday in a pretty tight matchup. And as of right now, Florida and Tampa Bay, last I had checked and last I had left the TV, we were going into the second period tied 1-1, which I don't know if that has changed. Tom, you can.
No, it has not. I have it on my phone on silent right now. Tampa's on a power play, about 5 minutes left in the second, still 1-1.
There you go. Pretty tight matchup going on there. Battle of Florida going on right there, which actually, why don't we talk about that one first? We're going to talk about the Florida Panthers versus Tampa Bay Lightning. Tom, predictions here. What do you expect to see? Who's going to come out on top?
All right, I'm going to go off topic one more time, and I promise you I'm done. While we're on the Rocky Mountain thing with Utah, congratulations to University of Denver on your 10th NCAA College Hockey National Championship. You ruined it for everybody. We wanted a Boston College, Boston University final. We want to see Macklin Celebrini and Gabe Perreault go up against each other, but no, regardless, congrats, guys. I'm going to leave it at that. We'll talk about this now. So this is a series that's a little bit interesting. Tampa Bay, we know who they are. They went out early last year. The 3 years prior to that, Stanley Cup finalists, 2 cups in a row, 1 finals loss. Florida last year came out of nowhere, won the President's Trophy 2 years ago. Came out of nowhere last year to go all the way to the finals against Vegas Golden Knights and lost in 5 games. Florida finished in first, clinched the Atlantic Division on the last night of the season. Don't know if the Bruins choked on purpose to the Leafs. Something we can talk about another day. Tampa, solid team. They were up and down early on, but they nailed that first wild card spot down weeks ago. So here we are again. Battle of Florida. Panthers with the home ice. Basically, this time around and every time around, because every time they played, I think the Panthers have had the home ice. But the Bolts have won every time. Now, Florida, on paper, technically, yes, does look a lot better than Tampa does. Florida really loaded up at the deadline. You brought in players like Vladimir Tarasenko. You brought in players. Hold on, why did this pop up here? You brought in some other players as well. You brought in Tarasenko. You have Aaron Ekblad back, and I'm just trying to see who's injured for them. Nobody is right now, so that's nice. They loaded up at the deadline. Nothing more you can really say about that. The thing with them is that since they have loaded up at the deadline, they haven't played all that well. They can't stay out of the box. They can't play disciplined hockey. They may throw the first hit, but then they feel the need to throw a second or third hit. They had a 2-0 lead on the Rangers a couple weeks back, Saturday night game at the Garden. I was there. Blew the 2-0 lead. Went up late, 3-2. Blew the 3-2 lead, lost in the shootout. A couple weeks later, played against the Boston Bruins. Big afternoon matchup on ABC. Same problem. Couldn't stay out of the box. Throwing the weight around against the Bruins, but get themselves in trouble. Bruins won the game in overtime. They've beat teams that they're supposed to beat, yes. That I will say. I can't deny that. But at the same time, the discipline factor versus a team with experience and a great power play against Tampa might hurt them. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think we're going to have an upset special here. I think that Tampa is going to take this series and send the Panthers home early. I really do. The team last year that kind of stood pat at the deadline, went on a run to the finals. I think they're going home early this year. I really do. I think this Tampa team, with the way things played out on the last day of the season with that Atlantic division, might have one last run in them. They very well might, especially with Steven Stamkos going UFA over the summertime. So I'm going here, Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games.
Ooh, that is quite a spicy take, if you will. And I can see that happening. I can absolutely see Tampa Bay upsetting the Florida Panthers here. And in all actuality, it isn't that much of an upset, because you look up and down the slide. First of all, you have the Art Ross Trophy winner on this team in Nikita Kucherov, 144 points in 81 games. Also, 100 assists on the season, same as Connor McDavid in Edmonton.
Yes.
We haven't seen anything like that since Wayne Gretzky, and you have 2 players that do it in the same season. Stellar. You have 3 guys on this team, on this Tampa Bay Lightning team, that are over a point per game. That's Nikita Kucherov with 144 points in 81 games, Braden Point with 90 points in 81 games, and Steven Stamkos with 81 points in 79 games in his UFA season. Leading scorers on this team, Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Steven Stamkos, right down the line. Braden Point leads the charge with 46 goals on the season. Then Nikita Kucherov with 44 and Steven Stamkos with 40. There is one big X factor for the Tampa Bay Lightning for this playoff, though, and it's actually an X factor in the sense of a person who is missing from this matchup, and that's Mikhail Sergachev. And I think that's going to play a bigger role than people realize on defense. They've been missing him since February, since going on IR. And to me, that defense already is missing pieces from previous Stanley Cup winners as well. And now you take away Mikhail Sergachev from that defensive core. And I don't know. I think for a team like the Florida Panthers, who can score at will, which we're going to get into the Florida Panthers leading scorers right now as well. I don't know. To me, that can really overexpose Andrei Vasilevsky in a matchup where the Florida Panthers, like I said, can score at will. So let's look at the Florida Panthers lineup right now. Sam Reinhart led the charge for the Florida Panthers, 94 points in 82 games, 57 goals on the season. Now, normally that would be, a legendary season, but you had some other players that scored just a couple more than him this season, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. You had a few other players that were over a point per game as well. Matt Tkachuk with 88 points in 80 games, and Alexander Barkov with 80 points in 73 games. One person that was close was Carter Verhaeghe with 72 points in 76 games as well. 34 goals to boot on that one. I do worry a little bit with Florida's lineup in terms of separation of talent once you get down into the bottom 6. But the bottom 6 also has some growing players down in their ranks that are performing quite well for their age. Anton Lundell, their third line center, for instance, at 22 years old, 35 points in 78 games. But remember, he's only getting about 15 minutes a night right now. He's doing a very good job down in the ranks as well. Eetu Luostarinen, 27 points in 82 games as well at 25 years old, also only getting about 15 minutes a night. Performing very, very nicely. This is a very balanced lineup, up and down, and their goaltending has been stellar this year as well. Sergei Bobrovsky has been one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, which you would kind of hope for with the amount of money that he's making. But Anthony Stolarz has not been a slouch this season as well. 27 games played this season for him, and he sports one of the best goals against average and save percentages in the entire NHL in that time as well. So Florida certainly has a lot going for them. Push comes to shove, this is going to be a fast-paced, hard-nosed, in-your-face matchup, a rivalry matchup as well. There's certainly some animosity between both sides as well. So we're definitely going to see some sides drop the mitts at least once per night. But it should be a fun series. This is definitely a series that I'm going to follow closely because I think there's a very strong possibility that whoever comes out of this matchup is the team that's coming out of the East going to the Stanley Cup. And I'm going to contradict you here, Tom. I actually think Florida is going to be the team that comes out of this matchup on top. But I'm still going to say that Tampa pushes them to the brink. I'm going to say Florida in 7 games because we got to make Florida fans suffer just a little bit. And I wonder where Tampa Bay is going to go after this season. I mean, I really would have rather them pick, draw any other name out of the hat for the playoffs other than Florida this year, because I think any other team, they would have easily made it out. But Florida's really going to give them a run for their money, and I see Florida coming out on top on this one. Moving on in the East Coast as well, we've got the Boston Bruins versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. I certainly have my opinions on this one. I could be controversial. I might not. Tom, let's see if you're going to be controversial first. What do you see happening in Boston versus Toronto?
And I hate to say it, I don't think I'm going to be controversial here at all. It's the same old story, and I know that maybe we should have done this before the playoffs started, but last night showed it as well. I mean, you look up and down the depth charts for these teams, and you look at the D, and you say, okay, maybe Boston. You lean towards Boston with the defense. You look at the goaltending, you lean towards Boston with the goaltending. But I mean, if you look at it on paper and just on paper, the Leafs should be leaps and bounds ahead of these guys. They should be. You have Austin Matthews, Max Domi, and Tyler Bertuzzi on your first line versus Boston's first line. I clicked the wrong button. I'm sorry. Which is Danton Heinen, Pavel Zacha, and David Pastrnak. You have Marchand, Coyle, and DeBrusk on the second line in Boston versus Matthew Knies, John Tavares, and Mitch Marner. William Nylander is out right now. You would assume he may slot back in there or slot back on the third line when he comes. And then there you go, too. William Nylander potentially plays on the third line versus Boston's third line of Jacob Lokow, Morgan Geekie, and Trent Frederick. All good names. But on paper, shouldn't Toronto be better than them? And the short answer is yes, it is. Short answer is the Leafs finally won a playoff series. They should take care of business here. But like the Boston Bruins have a kryptonite team when they see them in the playoffs, and that team's the Montreal Canadiens. That's a story for another day. Talk about those old Bruins-Habs matchups as much as we want, but we're not talking about them right now. The unfortunate part about it is this. The Toronto Maple Leafs yet again this year had not an underwhelming season, but not an overwhelming one. Toronto Maple Leafs yet again found themselves in that second or third spot instead of trying to go out and win the division, which they should be doing with the lineup they have. You saw last night total domination by the Boston Bruins, and a lot of people were saying this is going to turn around the other way. This is Toronto's time. The Bruins dominated them last night, and it looks like they didn't have to do all too much work to do it. I'm not saying these Boston Bruins are the same Boston Bruins in years past. I'm not saying these Boston Bruins are a cup favorite. But what I am saying is this. When you get to a certain point in the playoffs and you're in that situation and you know what to do and you know how to win in that situation, not too much different from when the Chicago Blackhawks won that Stanley Cup in 2015 when they really weren't the best team out there but just knew what to do in the situations they were in. And that is what I think is going to happen here with the Bruins on top of this 7-game embarrassment last year at the hands of the Panthers as well. They want to get that bad taste out of their mouths and their fans' mouths, and they have been here before against the Leafs enough times to know what to do in this situation. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be a short series, even after last night. The next 2 games are really going to determine where this might be going. If the Bruins get a big win in Game 2 and they go back to Toronto and the Leafs put up a soft effort in Game 3, this series might be short. I don't think it will. I think that the Leafs will wake up at some point, but I just don't know if the Leafs, even with Nylander coming back, even with all these names that they have on the offensive end of the puck, it's bad kryptonite. It's bad juju. And there's nothing here that says to me that this is going to turn the other way. It'd be a little bit different if the Leafs, won the President's Trophy and the Bruins just snuck into the playoffs on the last day of the season. These two teams are fairly evenly matched still. It's not an even matchup, but close to each other in points, second versus third in the division. And for that reason, I'm going to be Captain Obvious here. Bruins in 7. That may change depending on how this next game or 2 goes in this series, though. And if the Bruins really put their foot on the pedal, this might be over even quicker.
Some spicy picks. But for me, see, I want to troll and say, oh yeah, Boston in 4, just because I know that there are those people that are just like, okay, after last night, Boston in 4, 5-1 victory. You got to think Toronto wakes up. You got to think Toronto has the firepower to wake up, and they certainly do have the firepower to wake up. Last night, victims of circumstance, you're missing William Nylander. Yeah, I get that. But one player should not change the entire dynamic on a team, especially given the fact that you have some of the most talented players in all of hockey on your team. You've got Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, Morgan Riley, Max Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi, just to name a few people. let alone, one of the best goaltenders over the past 3 or 4 months in Ilya Samsonov. And now all of a sudden he lays an egg? It's ridiculous to me. I don't want to go back and rehash this again and watch Toronto fans on the brink again. But Toronto certainly has the means to make it over the hump in this matchup and to put this 5-1 loss in game one in the rearview mirror. Look at your players on this team. You have Austin Matthews, for instance, which I could, talk for eons about how we have not seen a goal scorer, in quite some time in Austin Matthews. 69 goals in 81 games. That is not something to scoff at. That is just legitimate dominance up and down. And congratulations to Austin Matthews on that one. But he needs to show up here in the playoffs too. He can't just lay an egg and he can't just stand pat and hope for goals to just will themselves over to him. Same with Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner can't sit on his hands. 85 points in 69 games as well. He would have been on pace to be tit for tat in points with Austin Matthews this year had he not missed a little bit of time. Willie Nylander is an obvious person that they're missing right now. 98 points in 82 games, 40 goals and 58 assists on this season. I mean, when you have William Nylander there to, set the dish for Austin Matthews or even finish a lot of those goals for Mitch Marner as well, he was a key piece missing yesterday for sure. But you need to have support from everywhere. You need that support from John Tavares, the captain of this team. You need Morgan Riley to step up offensively and set the tone in the back end for Toronto as well. You need Max Domi to be that sandpaper and, step up when another one of their guys goes down. Tyler Bertuzzi as well needs to step up as well, especially in the goal scoring department. But you need some role players to also step in and really, take the reins as well. I'm looking at some role players here that need to make their presence known here, such as David Kampf, in Nicholas Robertson, TJ Brody, who had an abysmal season this year, really needs to step it up here as well. And he has been stepping up as of late, but it needs to continue over into the playoffs as well, where he was very, very absent last night. But I think that this is something that they can overcome. Boston's lineup, although is very top heavy, certainly does have some blank spots on this team that can be exposed, namely the center depth. Your number one center right now, as we've talked about in the past, is a combination of Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha in your 1 or 2, depending on whatever day it is that you want to slot them at. They're both 1 and 2. 60 points from Charlie Coyle this year, 59 points from Pavel Zacha this year as well. Probably the better center out of the two is probably Charlie Coyle and the guy that you want to rely on and lean on a little bit more. But there's definitely a significant gap once you get past David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, and Pavel Zacha, and Charlie McAvoy. In 80 points this year, the next point getter was Jake DeBrusk with 40 points in 80 games. I mean, there are some glaring issues here with the Boston Bruins, but they didn't show it last night because they played solid up and down hockey. They're well coached as well. Jim Montgomery certainly has coached another magnificent Boston Bruins team that is certainly not as talented as last year's iteration, but they're really, really working hard. And they've got the best goalie tandem in the league in Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark. If I were the Bruins, one key to success is I would keep Jeremy Swayman in between the pipes as long as you can until you need to go to Linus Ullmark. I think Jeremy Swayman is going to be that X factor for the Boston Bruins and going to be the reason why Boston potentially sees their way out of the first round against Toronto, possibly their hardest matchup of a potential playoff map. If we look forward in terms of their roadmap, if they can make it out against Toronto, I think we could see them go into the Eastern Conference Final and possibly even to the Stanley Cup. But
that goalie thing last year is maybe why they didn't get by Florida, because Ullmark was playing hurt. They should have thrown Swayman in. Montgomery was afraid to do it. This year, I don't think he's going to be too afraid. If one of those guys is hurt, he's going to play the other one.
Exactly. He's going to ride the hot hand, which right now, Jeremy Swayman absolutely far and above is the hot hand right now. So that's the route that I think Boston should take. That being said, I like Boston's lineup. Albeit the issues and albeit the problems, Boston is certainly not a team to overlook for Toronto, and I know for sure that they're not overlooking them. It would, speak maybe to last night's game that maybe they overlooked them a little bit and they were missing William Nylander, but I think Toronto's going to find their way over the hump on this one. I do think Boston's going to push them a little bit harder than a lot of us realize. I think Toronto's going to come back in game 2 and 3 with some dominance. They might stumble in game 4 or 5. Ultimately, I do see Toronto winning in 6 games. I don't see them really falling into a hole against Boston, or I could be wrong, but I do see Toronto making it over the hump and making it to the second round again because, I mean, I want the laugh, and I know some other people want the laugh, but I don't know. I do see Toronto making it over the hump against Boston. I don't think we need to look at and overanalyze game 1 and, think this is the beginning of the end for Toronto. I will say this, though. If Toronto does not make it out of the first round and we see another first round exit from Toronto, heads have to roll. Sheldon Keefe, their head coach, needs to go down. And they need to trade one of their core members, and they need to decide quickly who that is, whether they trade away Nylander, Marner, or Matthews. You got to decide one of those 3, and one of them needs to go.
At this, Matthews just re-signed the big deal, so I think the odd man out, if it comes to that, is Marner. But at the same time, you can't base everything off one game either, and I do agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody that's saying, Boston's got this. Nah, we got to see the next few games. We got to see what happens. All right, Tom, let's talk about the matchup that I know you desperately want to talk about quite a bit. It's New York Rangers versus the Washington Capitals. And, New York Rangers are your President Trophy winner. Happened towards the end of the season. Congratulations to you, Tom, on that one. Nice little feather in your cap there. But what do we expect to see in this matchup? Can Washington possibly give New York a hard time in this matchup?
Well, I think they can, but it also determines on the overall health of Washington's defense. Now, Washington right now has two defensemen out. Rasmus Sandin and Nick Jensen are out. They're playing guys like Dylan McIlrath. That name still makes me want to throw up when I hear it because they drafted him over Vladimir Tarasenko back in 2010 and Vincent Iorio. Now, the Caps still have some of the old guard there. Alex Ovechkin, TJ Oshie, Tom Wilson, they're all still there. You still have Max Pacioretty on the third line. Charlie Lindgren has played good in net for them, and those are all great things to say. But you just look at the Rangers. For everything you can say about Lindgren, Igor Shesterkin has been on fire since the All-Star game. You talk about Ovechkin, he's still a good player, but right now Alexander Ovechkin is not as good as Artemi Panarin. TJ Oshie can still play. Tom Wilson can still play. But the Rangers also have guys like Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider who are playing okay. They're not playing great. They're playing okay. The Rangers on their end, what they're going to need to do is, the 5-on-5 has to improve. And I think everybody knows that. I think it can improve. On top of it, Panarin has had a great season. Yeah, almost Hart Trophy-esque. Yes. He's got to bring in the playoffs this year. I'm not going to knock him for 2 years ago. Could he have played better? Yes. That team was on a run. That team was inexperienced. And even if that team got by Tampa, was everybody still crying about it? They weren't beating Colorado in the finals. I'm sorry. And also what helped Panarin that year was that Igor Shesterkin, Mika Zibanejad, and Chris Kreider, and even Filipino to a lesser extent, had monster years those playoffs. This time is Panarin's time to shine. He's got to put up or shut up here. Zibanejad and Kreider need to play better as well, but this is really Panarin's time to shine. His line with Vincent Trocheck and Alexis Lafreniere have been the best Rangers line all season. And this is a series where they really need to not go cold. And you sit there as a Ranger fan, you think back to the Lundqvist years, how many times you knew you had Lundqvist back there, but then you came in and you were expecting a guy like Marian Gaborik or Brad Richards or Rick Nash or Marty St. Louis to go out there and dominate, and they just didn't. And then you're looking at guys like Derek Brassard and Derek Stepan to win you big games, and that was a big, big problem back then. They never had the game breakers. These teams are different, but the game breakers they have to be game breakers. Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, Lafreniere to a lesser extent. They got to be game breakers here. We know what Igor can do in the playoffs. We've seen it. We know what Adam Fox can do in the playoffs. He's a point-per-game defenseman in the playoffs. Their forwards really have to play, and if the Rangers have any Stanley Cup aspirations here, this series has got to be over early. Now, a lot of people, including Caps fans, including neutrals, saying, oh, this is a walk in the park for the Rangers, 4-5, it's over, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to be over in 4. I don't think it is. I think that the Caps team, while they're not the greatest, I can't see them getting steamrolled by the Rangers here. I would like it to be over in 5. I would. But my gut here is saying 6 games. As much as I don't want to say this, it's saying 6 games for this series. These Rangers, they tend to get themselves into these problems in the playoffs that they shouldn't be getting into. And until it's proven otherwise, I can't sit here and legitimately say that they're just going to go out there and dominate a series. The only time they did that in the last era with Hank here, they did it against Pittsburgh back in 2015. They got out of that series in 5, and all those games were 2-1 wins. I'm not saying the Caps may ever be in the lead in this series. I'm not saying there's ever going to be that scare. But I just don't know if this is going to be over that quickly. I am thinking Rangers in 6. I'm thinking you may see a game where Ovechkin turns back the clock. There may be a game where Tom Wilson does something. There may be a game where Pacioretty does something. But I just think I think with the way Washington's D is right now and the uncertainty with the regulars who are hurt, I don't think that's going to be enough to overcome the Rangers team. And this might not be, these Rangers might be not be as deep as they were last year or the year before, but they had a better season. They didn't win 54 games by accident. They didn't win 55 games by accident. You know, Panarin didn't get 120 points by accident. So I'm going Rangers in 6. And yeah, not a homer alert. That's what I think is going to happen. I might be a pessimist among some Ranger fans, and I want them to prove me wrong. Let them win it in 4 or 5. Prove me wrong here. Let the series be shorter for the Rangers. Prove me wrong, please. Because if this team wants to go far, they're going to need a short series at some point against somebody.
Yeah, if there was any team that needed a short series in this particular playoffs, it's the Rangers for sure. I mean, I look at up and down the Rangers lineup, and they certainly have some players that stick out on this team. Artemi Panarin, 120 points in 82 games this year as well. He's just been magnificent. Maybe, a hard consideration does get thrown his way for sure. Mika Zibanejad is another player that sticks out. Alexis Lafreniere has really started to break out towards the middle and late to this season as well. Certainly big expectations for him next year. Chris Kreider is always a person I think of as well. And Adam Fox, of course. Igor Shesterkin has been one of the better goaltenders of since post All-Star break. But Washington has a very interesting team where I counted them out going into the All-Star break, and they just decided to turn back the clock. Alex Ovechkin turned back the clock. John Carlson turned back the clock. Their leading scorer, Dylan Strome, also had a fantastic season as well. 82 full 82 games that he played and 67 points on the season. Really just solid up and down for the Washington Capitals. Charlie Lindgren is the MVP of this team right now, though, so far, for sure. Charlie Lindgren, in 48 games started, he won 25 games with a 2.67 goals against average and a 911 save percentage, all above average for the league this season. Really just solid job by Washington, but is it enough to overcome the Rangers? I don't think it is. I'm going to keep it quick on this one. I actually do think the Rangers are going to have a short series here. It's not going to be a clean sweep. I think Washington is going to give a scare to Rangers fans, maybe even game 1 or game 2, and think, oh God, this could go any which way. I think the Rangers are going to run away with this one. I'm going to say Rangers in 5 on this one pretty confidently. And this is probably one of the matchups I'm probably most confident about. Speaking of other matchups I'm very confident about, the New York Islanders versus the Carolina Panthers. Oh my God, I'm already thinking of the NFL draft. The Carolina Hurricanes. So the New York Islanders versus the Carolina Hurricanes. Tom, we'll keep it quick on this one because this seems pretty decisive here. Who do you think comes away in this matchup?
In terms of it being pretty decisive, I don't know if you can even. I want to say it is, right? I want to say it is. I want to say that this is a clear one-way thing. Now, I look at the depth charts here, right? And I look at Carolina, especially their first 2 lines and their third and fourth lines. And it does very much seem, especially the Islanders' fourth line. That fourth line looks horrible. I'm sorry. That just doesn't. That fourth line, 2 of those guys should not be dressing for the playoffs. I'm sorry. I look at the defense. I look at the defense. It's the same thing. I think I think there's a clear advantage to the Carolina Hurricanes. It's not opinion, that's fact. But it's when you get down to that goaltending, and you have Freddie Anderson and Peter Kochetkov. Then you look at what the Islanders have. You have Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov. Now, that's where you tip your cap towards the Islanders. Say what you will. Now, while I'm saying I don't know if there's going to be an upset here, one of these guys turns into a brick wall here for these Carolina Hurricanes. It might spell a little bit of trouble. The Hurricanes are not a speed team. They are an offensive team, yes, but their game is prefaced on patience and defense. They suffocate the opponent down and try to get them to make mistakes and play a puck possession game. The problem is, by the way, Florida just scored to go up 2-1. Regardless of that. The problem is that if you get, especially Sorokin, turns into a brick wall down there, how long does it go before you get frustrated and the Islanders start playing off a counterattack and scoring goals against you? Now, it didn't happen yesterday, but that was a close game yesterday. That was a 3-1 game, and that game was down to the wire until the Canes scored the empty net goal. And as patient as the Canes are, the Islanders are going to play a heavy, patient game too. They are. And they still have a lot of personnel left over from those runs they went on against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and especially that pair, Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock. They still have that, guys. They still have guys like Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri. They still have Anders Lee. They still have all these guys. So while I am not saying this is going to be an upset, I don't think this is going to be a clear, decisive walk in the park for the Hurricanes either. So I'm gonna not be controversial here because I don't think my prediction is going to be who's going to win. I don't think it's going to be controversial. But what I'm going to say is this: I'm going with the Hurricanes, but oh man, I think this one's going 7. I do. I just think that the Islanders are going to put some doubt in their minds at some points in this series. There's going to be points where the Islanders are going to win a game or two, and Brain Trust in Carolina is going to be going, why are we doing this? Why do we load this team up? Tom Dundon's going to be like, why am I spending my money on this? Are we the San Jose Sharks yet again? I'm still giving it to Carolina, but I don't think this is going to be easy. And last night showed that the Islanders are not just going to lay down and die against these guys. And Patrick Waugh is no stranger. He's no stranger to getting in other teams' heads.
No, and that's true too. I mean, a lot of people think that of potential sweep alerts, Carolina, New York could be one of those sweep alerts. I definitely don't think so, but it's not nearly as close, I think, as you think here, Tom, because you look on paper and you look at the goaltending matchup and you look at on Carolina's side, Freddie Anderson and Pyotr Kochetkov, and then you look on the other side for the New York Islanders and you see Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov, and you think, okay, yeah, on paper, the Islanders certainly have this, but we also have to think about the current circumstances on both teams. Sorokin has had a bit of a down year this year. He's coming in on the colder side coming into this matchup. Freddie recently came back over the last month after being out for a significant period of time with a blood clot in his leg. He's come back, and ever since coming back, he's been one of the best goaltenders in the entire league. In 16 games, in all 16 games that he's played, he's won 13 of those games. He started all 16 of those games, and he's got a 1.84 goals against average and a 932 save percentage. We're looking at a hot goaltender here, and he showed it last night, limiting the Islanders to 1 goal last night. Now, I'm not saying that, just by this one small sample size, that's going to decide the fact that Carolina's coming away in this. Not the case. I'm also looking at some other players on this team that has really stepped up this season as well. Starting with their leading scorer, Sebastian Aho. Not that Sebastian Aho on the New York Islanders, Sebastian Aho on the Carolina Hurricanes, which, God, this is going to get so confusing so quickly. But 89 points in 78 games for Sebastian Aho on the Carolina Hurricanes, 36 goals, 53 assists. And I got to say, with those 36 goals, it felt like at least half of them were game winners. This guy has been captain clutch for the Carolina Hurricanes. And I would not doubt if we get a close matchup like we did last night, but even in this series and maybe even beyond, Sebastian Aho is somehow going to be the guy that scores that game-winning goal. And because he finds himself in those situations time and time again, his work ethic is fantastic. He might not be the most talented player on the ice on a given night, but he is going to outwork any player on the ice on given nights. And he shows that time and time again. Now, the rest of the lineup, you've got a lot of good support within this lineup as well for Carolina. Seth Jarvis, 67 points in 81 games. Teuvo Teravainen, 53 points in 76 games. Martin Necas, 53 points in 77 games. Andrei Svechnikov, 52 points in 59 games. He was nearly on a point per game pace before having to miss some time. But you've also got some really, really interesting role players on this team too. Stefan Nason is a guy that constantly gets overlooked, but has, slowly become one of the more consistent fourth line guys in the NHL. I look at Jordan Stahl as well in that bottom six, the true captain of this team, the true heart and soul of this team. And he's still proven it time and time again at 35 years old. Just Barry Kotkaniemi, I also think of as well. 27 points in 79 games while playing limited minutes as well, only about 13 minutes a night. Their defense has also been very good this season as well, and picking up a lot of the brunt in things as well. And then also there's the other factor of a person that they acquired late at the deadline in Evgeny Kuznetsov, who also scored a very important goal last night in game one and could be a role player going forward over these next number of games for Carolina as well. Now, New York certainly does have a mountain to climb against the Carolina Hurricanes, but it's not impossible, because I look at this lineup and do they score the most goals in the league? No, they don't. Do they have the most interesting lineup in the league? No, they don't. But they've got work ethic on this team. Matthew Barzal might be one of the most talented players and underrated players in the entire NHL. 80 points in 80 games. That's a point per game. Noah Dobson, who I think should get nods for the Norris Trophy this year, 70 points in 79 games as well, 60 assists to boot for him. Brock Nelson, their leading scorer with 34 goals this year, he had 69 points in 82 games, which is just like Austin Matthews with scoring 69 goals also. It's kind of nice. But, you have role players throughout the team. You had Kyle Palmieri, who had a career resurgence this year with 30 goals in 82 games this year, playing a full 82 games, that is, too. Anders Lee with 37 points in 81 games. I mean, this is not as far apart as people seem. But the big difference here, I think, is going to be the goaltending. I think that is what's going to separate things. And Ilya Sorokin, as good and as talented as he is, he has struggled this year. I mean, 19 losses on the season in 56 games started, a 908 save percentage, a 3.01 goals against average. It's slightly below average for, and especially below average for his talent level. Kind of makes you think maybe they should look towards Semyon Varlamov in some of this matchup if they really start the flag. If they get to game 3 and Sorokin's laid an egg in the first 3 games and they're on the ropes, I think that Patrick Waugh needs to consider, putting Semyon Varlamov between the pipes and letting him have at it and figuring it out from there. But if you ask me in terms of who's going to win this matchup, I don't think it's clear cut as some people think. I think the Islanders are going to give Carolina a run for their money, but I don't think it's going to be that close. I'm going to say Carolina in 6 games. I think New York is going to steal 2 close games away, but I still think it's going to be Carolina in 6. We're going to move on to the West Coast here. Let's start with our first matchup, the Vegas Golden Knights, or in this case, the Vegas Golden Cheaters versus the Dallas Stars. And I certainly have my opinions on Vegas Golden Knights in the NHL, and certainly ways that we could revamp the rules in the summertime. But Tom, let's start here with you, because I certainly have my opinions on this matchup and some pretty bold opinions on this matchup. So I'll let you take it away first. Vegas versus Dallas. Who's got it?
Well, it's funny with this matchup. You have the Dallas Stars, who have been great this year, still the deepest team in the league, against the defending Stanley Cup champions, who made a lot of moves at the deadline. I won't say they didn't. But what did I say before when we did the trade deadline reviews? This lineup, as constructed with Vegas, hasn't played one game together yet. One game. Mark Stone is just coming back. Anthony Mantha is going to slide in on the third line. William Carrier is still out. Thomas Hertel slotting in on line 2. You look at them, Alex Pietrangelo is going to be back too. Now you look at them, and on forward, seems kind of even. Not saying Dallas is a slouch either. You have Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski as your first line. Marchment, Duchesne, Sagan is your second. Your third is Ben, Johnson, and Stankoven, and that's not bad either. And let me just see if Dallas doesn't have anybody out. The D, you look at them. Dallas's D is pretty good. Thomas Harley, Miro Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, Chris Tanev, Ryan Suter, and Nils Lundqvist. Vegas's D, similar. Hannafin and Pietrangelo, McNabb, Theodore, Haig, Martinez. Very similar too. The goaltending is where the decided advantage is towards Dallas. Jake Ottinger has been a great goalie the last couple of years. One other thing that Dallas has is this. As deep as this team is, and they're just as deep as Vegas, Vegas might be deeper with the names on paper, they've been playing together all year. This Vegas team hasn't. And like I said last year as a Ranger fan, we saw this movie last year. You come in, you bring 2 or 3 guys at the trade deadline, and you try to make this work with a short amount of time, and they're doing this with no amount of time. Hurdle got into a couple games at the end there. They're doing this with almost no time. And you're going up against the number 1 team in the West, deepest team in the league, and a team that thinks they probably should have beat you in the Western Conference Finals last year. I remember in the past, LA would make big moves at the deadline, but that would be for one guy, whether it be for Jeff Carter or for Marian Gaborik to win themselves Stanley Cups. Vegas brought in 2 players here, just like the Rangers did last year. So the reality is that I am leaning towards Dallas in this. Do I think Vegas will win some games here? Yeah, I do. I'm not going to say this is going to be an easy series for the Stars because I don't think it is. And I think this might be the last team Dallas wanted to see coming into the playoffs. I think they almost would have rather Vegas gone up against Edmonton and they would have played LA if I was a Dallas fan. I think Vegas is going to give them a little bit of a challenge here. I do. I think, and I know I'm being predictable with the 7 games, but I think it's going to go 6 or 7. But I do think at the end of the day, Dallas takes this series. I just think that the factors of bringing in all this new personnel, not letting them gel together, not letting them play together down the line to see what you can do, to see, how you can set this team up is going to be the end of this Vegas run. And we'll have a new Stanley Cup champion this year. Vegas is going home in round 1. I'm going with Dallas in 7. But like I had mentioned before, this might be something where you might be scratching your head with Dallas because I'm going to tell you right now, I think this was the last team Dallas wanted to see. I think Dallas is pissed that they blew it against Anaheim the other night. I think Dallas wanted LA in the worst kind of way.
Yeah, I got to think that too. And now Edmonton gets to reap the benefit of playing a potentially weaker team in the Pacific Division. But we'll get to that matchup a little bit later. But I'll preface my thoughts with this. I said in our preseason video, our preseason predictions of who I thought was eventually going to go on to win the Stanley Cup, that my opinion was that the Dallas Stars were going to win the Stanley Cup. And my opinion has not changed. I still think that this is Dallas's Stanley Cup to lose. I think they have the most balanced lineup up and down. And if you look at the point breakdowns throughout the entire lineup, my stance holds true. You look up and down from, first in points to 10th in points, and we've got some really, really good balance. Your first top point getter was Jason Robertson with 80 points in 82 games. And then you look down at number 10 is Thomas Harley with 47 points in 79 games. So you had 9 players that had 50 or more points this year. That is amazing. That's amazing lineup balance throughout. Those 9 players that had more than 50 points this year: Tyler Seguin, Mason Marchment, Miro Heiskanen, Jamie Benn, Matt Duchene, Roope Hintz, Wyatt Johnston, Joe Pavelski, Jason Robertson. And then you have Thomas Harley that nearly cracked it with 47 points. Dallas is just balanced up and down. And then another big X factor on this team was one of their pre-deadline moves in picking up Chris Tanev from the Calgary Flames. He has been a rock on defense for them since acquiring him. And you look between the pipes, although he's had a slightly down year this year, Jake Ottinger has played well as of late. A .905 save percentage and a 2.72 goals against average, winning 35 games this year and 53 starts this year. But you look down below him at a more than capable backup in Scott Wedgwood as well, who has won 16 games in 28 starts this year. So Dallas has a lot of balance. The real X factor here in my mind for Dallas as a reason why they could not win the cup is who their head coach is, and that's Pete DeBoer. Pete DeBoer has this unfortunate, he's a coach that knows how to bring a team to the Stanley Cup, but he doesn't know how to win the Stanley Cup. And I hope that this is a trend that does not continue for the Dallas Stars, because I do think that they're your eventual Stanley Cup winner. So obviously this is going to make my prediction, pretty obvious here. But let's look at the Vegas Golden Knights and let's humor this a little bit. Their top goal scorer this year was Jonathan Marchessault with 42 goals. Not anything to scoff at as well. But to echo Tom's point here, this lineup has not played together all year, and now you're finally getting them all together. This isn't, EA Sports. You can't just plug and play guys and, just let a video game simulation take it all the way. That's not how life works. Now, obviously, getting Mark Stone back at a very convenient time is obviously going to help. He's a major X factor here for the Vegas Golden Knights. I don't know if it's going to be enough for them, because I also look between the pipes for them. And although they've had consistent goaltending from Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson this year, sporting very, similar numbers overall in a straight tandem, I don't know if we're going to have that magic like we had last year. And Vegas is probably wishing they could have faced any other team in the first round other than the Dallas Stars. But here we are. They're facing the Dallas Stars in the first round, and we're going to see how this works out for them. This is a lineup that has been banged up all year, and it's the Stanley Cup curse. It's the Stanley Cup hangover for them. Do I think they're going to win a few games? I do. I do think that they are going to really push Dallas, and they're really going to, try their hardest to be back-to-back champions. I just don't see it in the cards for Vegas. I'm going to say Dallas here in 6 games, and yeah, I think Dallas is in for quite the run. I think we could see some magic here in Dallas. Moving on to the next matchup, we've got the Winnipeg Jets versus the Colorado Avalanche. Tom, who do you think comes away in this matchup?
So it's funny. We go back to the depth charts here, right? In terms of skaters, the Colorado Avalanche have 2 of the best players in this series, regardless of anybody else suiting up for these teams. You have Nathan McKinnon and you have Cale Makar, and they have won the Stanley Cup. They won it 2 years ago. That was a fun team to watch. I liked watching them play a lot. So your first line in Colorado, you have Parise, McKinnon, and Rantanen going up against Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Gabe Vilardi, the first line. The second line, the first line I lean towards Colorado. It's you start getting past that first line and you get past that first D pair with Colorado versus Winnipeg, and that's where this is going to get funny. Winnipeg's second line is Ehlers, Monahan, and Toffoli. Colorado's is Nichushkin, Middlestat, and Lehkonen. I lean towards Winnipeg. The third and fourth lines I'm not going to read out, but I'm going to tell you right now, the third and fourth lines for Winnipeg are miles ahead. Maybe not miles ahead of Colorado, but they're better than Colorado's third and fourth lines. You look at the D, the first D pair in Colorado, you have Cale Makar on that D pair. He's the best defenseman in the league, one of the best. I'm not going to go any more into it. But then you get past that, and you look at Winnipeg's second and third pairs versus Colorado's second and third pairs. I got to lean towards Winnipeg with that as well. And now we go to the ugly position of goaltender. And to top that off, Winnipeg has Morgan Barron day to day right now. Barron's going to slide in somewhere, which is also going to equally make Winnipeg better with those bottom 3 forward lines. And this is where it gets ugly. This goaltending is where it gets ugly because Connor Hellebuck has been a beast this year. He has. On the other side, you have Alexander Georgiev, who has been anything but good for the Avalanche lately. Cruising up 3-0 last Sunday afternoon against the Vegas Knights. They blow it and lose 4-3. Obviously, they blew Edmonton out the other night. That game meant nothing. You look at Hellebuck this year, 60 games played, 37 wins, 2.39 goals against average, 5 shutouts. His last 5 games, all 5 wins. All 5 wins. Hellebuck is in playoff mode right now. And as great as McKinnon is, and as great as Makar is, the hot hand, the hot goalie, the depth is going to overwhelm these Avalanche here. And the questions are going to start arising in the offseason in Colorado. What do you do with Jared Bednar? What do you do with some of these depth players? What do you do with the draft? Maybe start drafting better. Maybe start scouting better. I don't think these Avalanche are done by any means. I don't think the story of this crew with McKinnon and Makar, I don't think the book is closed on this yet. But in terms of winning another Stanley Cup this year, I just don't know if I see it with them right now. It's kind of Pittsburgh-esque. After the Penguins won that first cup in 2009 with Crosby and crew, it took them a while to figure it out again. And I don't know if it's going to take this team as long as it took them, but I just don't see it happening this year. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be another early first-round exit for the Avalanche after being such a dominant Cup winner 2 years ago. I don't think it's going to be a short series. I know I'm on the 7-game punch again, but at the end of the day, I think McKinnon and Makar will make it interesting. I'm not sure. I want to say 7. It could even be over in 6 for the Jets. I just don't think. I think with Connor Hellebuck playing out of his mind for Winnipeg and Georgiev not being able to stop a beach ball and them having nobody behind him to step in is a problem. Pavel Francouz on the IR. Their backup is a gentleman named Justice Anunen, who's probably from Finland, and I am so sorry if I butchered that name. Obviously, the Avs have Jonathan Drouin out, saving Gerard day-to-day. Huh? I'm sorry?
No, you didn't butcher Justice Anunen's name.
Okay.
You're fine.
So there's a chance Drouin may come back. There's a chance Gerard may come back. And if this series gets funny, who knows? Maybe Gabriel Landeskog will miraculously be able to play hockey again. But at the end of the day, you don't need the greatest. It's good to have great goaltending to win. As we saw with those Pittsburgh teams that the aforementioned teams, you had Matt Murray in net, not the greatest goalie ever, but could stop a puck. Georgiev can't even do that now. So it's going to, I'm going with Winnipeg here in 6 or 7. I'd say 7, but I think it could be over earlier than that especially if Winnipeg's depth it wins outright over Colorado's.
It's funny because I could see this series going either which way, and I certainly think I know where this series is going to go, but there's certainly question marks. I mean, Tom, you brought up a really good point in the goaltending matchup. Connor Hellebuck absolutely is in playoff mode right now. You look at his stats up and down right now, and there is no reason why Connor Hellebuck should not be the Vezina Trophy winner at the end of this year. In 60 starts this year, he won 37 games. He sported a .921 save percentage and a 2.39 goals against average. If that's not Vezina caliber, I don't know what is. But he's got a more than competent backup in Laurent Brossoit behind him, sporting a .927 save percentage and a 2.00 goals against average. God forbid something happens to Connor Hellebuck in this series. Laurent Brossoit can absolutely come in and possibly step up pretty competently if Connor Hellebuck does go down for whatever reason. What scares me about the Winnipeg Jets is you have a pretty big reliance right now within your lineup on certain players. Mark Scheifele, Josh Morrissey, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, Gabriel Velarde. All of these players are guys that are scoring close to a point per game pace. Close to it. Not quite, though. None of these players hit a point per game, but they came close. But you look at the rest of the lineup, and all you've got past Nikolai Ehlers with 61 points in 82 games. That's number 4 on the list. Next after that is Cole Perfetti with 38 points in 71 games. They're just not scoring enough for me to really kind of say that they definitively have this in hand. But sometimes a really good defense makes up for a lackluster offense. And Winnipeg certainly does have a good defense. And they have the best goaltending in the league. Now, in Colorado's case, they sport one of the best offenses in the league. You know, with Nathan McKinnon, who scored 51 goals this year, Mikko Rantanen, who scored 42 goals this year, Cale Makar as a defenseman scoring 21 goals this year, 90 points in 77 games for Cale Makar. Yes, they are going to be missing Jonathan Drouin for at least game 1, but another player that shouldn't be overlooked on this team, who is a potential X factor on this team, is Valeri Nichushkin, who did miss some time for going into the NHL Players Assistance Program. But 53 points in 54 games, he was nearly at a point per game pace, which is remarkable for his ability. So, you know, we could see Colorado see their way out of this, out of the first round and into the second round. Zach Parise is certainly going to be playing with a lot of motivation. This is his last chance at a Stanley Cup. He has announced that he is retiring at the end of this year officially. And at 39 years old, he's certainly ready to. But I think he's got one final push in him to really make sure that Colorado can get there. And I think he can. The real X factor here is Alexander Georgiev, who has been, as Tom mentioned, and I'll even echo it here, anything but a superstar lately. an 897 save percentage, and a 3.02 goals against average to end the season. Certainly below average for starting goaltenders in the league, but they need him to step up here. And I think ultimately he will. I do see the Colorado Avalanche finding their way out of the first round, but I think Winnipeg's going to push them to the brink. I'm going to say here Colorado in 7 games. We're slowly wrapping up our predictions here. We're moving on to the Vancouver Canucks versus the Nashville Predators. Tom, who do you see coming out of this one?
Well, this one is a funny one, to me at least. Vancouver was a surprise team this year. Maybe not a surprise to me, but surprise to a lot of others. And they're back in it. And Vancouver, on paper, should look a lot better than Winnipeg does. You have JT Miller and Elias Pettersson as your first 2 centers down the middle, and that's great. That's a great thing to have. You had Elias Lindholm. They might be regretting that trade a little bit. You have Connor Garland on your third line. And you just look up and down, and you have Quinn Hughes as your number 1 defenseman, who has also been nothing short of great this year for them either. In net, you have Thatcher Demko, who has been great as well. But you go look over at Nashville, and Nashville's just been on a heater. And maybe they don't have the caliber of players that the Canucks have. But you got guys who have been there before. You most definitely do. And UC Soros, I'll say, is probably better than Thatcher Demko in net. You look at some of the players that have Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, Anthony Beauvillier, Luke Evangelista, Jason Zucker, Ryan McDonough. You look at all these guys. And what do all these guys maybe have that some of these guys don't? Experience. They've been deep. Some of them have won Stanley Cups. And some of them have played together before in Nashville. You look at Vancouver. They were there 4 years ago in the bubble, but they haven't been back since. And I look up and down this lineup, and I look at their lineup, and on paper, it should lean towards Vancouver. This should be an easy win for them. But I just don't know. I don't know. As great as the year Vancouver has had, I just don't know if this team right now is primed to go on a run. I think they got to hit a roadblock, and I think they're going to be hitting that roadblock right here. I'm going to go with Preds in 6. I am. I think the Canucks are going to win a game here or there. But this Vancouver team, I was saying it even then when they were going on those little runs earlier in the year. I just don't know if this Vancouver team right now has that experience, has that grit, has that know-how to go deep in the West and to go and win a Stanley Cup. I just don't see it. And I think they're going to be going home early this year. But not to say that this is going to, that the story is going to be the same with them and they're going to have trouble. I think the Canucks will be back. But I think this is going to be their lesson here. This is going to be their lesson lived and lesson learned against Nashville. So I'm going with Nashville in 6 here. I think Nashville is going to have some of the intangibles that Vancouver still has to learn that they don't know yet.
I'll say this. I'm going to spoil it here too. I'm going to say Nashville here wins in 7 games. I'm going to go, to the brink on this one. And there's going to be a main reason why for Vancouver not winning here. I think they're really missing Andrei Kuzmenko. I think that trade, in hindsight, getting Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames and giving up on Andrei Kuzmenko in that deal is going to prove to be fatal for them this year because Kuzmenko played such an important role on that team on a nightly basis. And he's a guy that they've been missing ever since they traded him. And Elias Lindholm has just not been the player that was as advertised for them. And Lindholm is a very talented player, but since coming over from Calgary, he hasn't really wowed me. He hasn't really wowed anybody, to be honest. I mean, Kuzmenko before leaving Vancouver, 21 points in 43 games, but you pick up Elias Lindholm, 12 points in 26 games, and he was playing almost 18 minutes a night. That is not what you were hoping for from a guy that was supposed to take a first or second line spot. And Kuzmenko has only flourished in Calgary since being let go by Vancouver. That's going to be a real X factor to me. But another big X factor on Nashville's side is 2 big keys in my mind, and that is their leading scorer this year, Philip Forsberg, 48 goals in 82 games this year, 94 points overall, and Roman Josi with 85 points in 82 games. I think both of them are going to be major X factors here. And then add to the account that you've got some players that have gone to the big dance before, adding their experience in big situations here. Ryan O'Reilly, their second line center here, 69 points in 82 games. Ryan McDonough with 32 points in 74 games. Both guys here that have been to the big, to the bigger matchups here. So I think that Nashville coming in so hot in the playoffs, I think we could very well see them upset the Vancouver Canucks here. I'm going to say Nashville here in 7. This isn't Vancouver's last ride here, though. They're going to be back for the next few years and could even maybe be hoisting the Stanley Cup in years to come. We'll have to see what happens. Going on to our final matchup here, it's the Edmonton Oilers versus the LA Kings. This feels predictable to me, Tom. What do you think here?
Well, I'll say about the Oilers. In the past, it was McDavid can never get to the playoffs. McDavid can never get to the playoffs. The Oilers can never win in the playoffs. The Oilers know how to win early in the playoffs now. They do. Right now, where LA is, they're kind of just, they seem to be okay with and content with just being a middle-of-the-road team that, gets a low seed in the first round every year and makes it. And just seem to be riding out the years of Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty. I don't know if Edmonton is a Stanley Cup contender this year. There's a lot that needs to be addressed there. But one thing, like I said, that the Oilers have learned how to do over the past few years is how to win in the first and second round. And I just look up and down the lineups. We already know this. We've reviewed this series too many times lately. I think that it's just another predictable Oilers in 6 right now. The Oilers have better personnel than the Kings do. The Kings seem to be this content, okay team that has no problem with making the playoffs and losing in round 1 or 2. The Oilers right now are known for them being able to get out of the first round easily. Riding on the backs of McDavid and Draisaitl. They're finally not playing them together on the same line this year. I'm not going to go more in depth. I'm not going to analyze anymore because this is a movie we've seen 90,000 times already over the last couple of years. So Oilers in 6, move on, nothing to see here.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short and sweet on this one. I mean, I think Edmonton's really going to overwhelm the LA Kings here. And I don't think it's going to be nearly as close as a lot of people are predicting at the moment. I don't know why people are predicting this so closely, but we have a significant gap in terms of goal scoring here. I mean, you look up and down Edmonton's lineup. Connor McDavid, another 100 assist getter, 132 points on the season in 76 games, 32 goals scored for him, 41 goals by Leon Draisaitl. Evan Bouchard had 82 points in 81 games played. He could be getting some Norris Trophy nods as well. And Zach Hyman, 54 goals in 80 games. This is not as close as a lot of people realize. I think LA getting here and limping in, I think this is going to be a quick exit for them. And this is not going to be LA's last rodeo. This is a young and developing team that I think in the next few years is going to start dominating the Pacific Division again. And maybe LA fans kind of hope that maybe they can get Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty one more Stanley Cup before their runs are officially done. Who knows? But in this case, I think it's Edmonton's time to shine here. And I don't know if they go much further than this past the second round. That's going to be left to be seen and left to be predicted next week. But to me, I think that I'm going to be bold here. I'm going to say Edmonton in 4. I think it's going to be a clean sweep. I don't see LA doing that well.
I don't know. I feel like you can almost compare this to the 80s, the mid 80s, when it was like, okay, Edmonton had Marcel Dion and Charlie Simmer and Dave Taylor, and they were all good and stuff, but not Edmonton. Did I say Edmonton? I meant LA with Charlie Simmer and
Marcel Dion.
Dave Taylor, all those guys, Gary Younger. And it's not to say that they weren't good, but you looked over at Edmonton. Edmonton had Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, and Paul Coffey. Just that much better, So, yeah, this is another. I'm not even sure if I'll watch much of this one, to tell you the truth.
I mean, I'm going to watch as much as I can, and I hope you guys watch as much as you can too, because it's time for us to stop talking. It's time to watch more playoff matchups, but make sure you follow us down below, youtube.com/NHL on i80 Sports. So that way you can get our reactions throughout the NHL playoffs, figure out if our predictions came true, and join the conversation down below with what your predictions are. We want you guys to talk to us about that. We'd love to join the conversation with you guys on that. Comment down below. Let us know what you guys think. And if you're on X or Twitter, whatever you call it. Make sure you follow us down below at I80_sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. But like I said, it's time for us to stop droning on. It's time to watch the first round of the NHL playoffs. We'll be back for the second round in our predictions. But until then, I'm Brian. He's Tom. This has been yet another episode of NHL on I80 Sports.